Haley, we had the lawyer revise the will. Your entire share now belongs to your brother. Patricia didn't even blink as she said it. Her words sliced through the room sharper than the carving knife beside the roast. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos. And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us, what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. I felt the air in my chest turn heavy, my fork pausing halfway to my lips. Across the table, Blake leaned back in his chair, lips curling into the kind of arrogant grin he'd worn since we were kids. Morgan, his fiancée, brushed her hand against his arm and whispered something smug enough to make him laugh under his breath. Edward, my father, kept his eyes glued to his plate, chewing like the conversation didn't concern him at all. Cowardice dressed as silence. I set my silverware down, each movement deliberate, even though my hands trembled underneath the table. And you decided to tell me this. Tonight? Patricia swirled her wine glass lazily, her tone dripping with superiority. It's what's best for the family. Blake has stability, a future. You've always been emotional, reckless. Money would only burden you. The sting burned hot in my throat, but I forced a thin smile. Emotional, reckless, that's all I am to you? Blake lifted his glass in mock celebration. Don't be bitter, sis. Who knows? Maybe I'll hire you as my assistant when I'm managing the estate. Morgan laughed openly now, the sound sharp and ugly. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I just let the silence stretch, let them believe they'd already won. My stillness wasn't weakness, it was patience. And then, it happened. A familiar presence appeared behind me. Ryan. My husband's hand brushed the back of my chair as he stepped forward, his expression calm, steady. But it wasn't just him. He carried something heavy, an envelope sealed with the lawyer's crest, its edges worn from careful handling. His voice, even and unwavering, cut through the smug laughter. Strange thing, Patricia, Ryan said, laying the envelope on the table with quiet finality. Because this is the actual will. Patricia's face drained of color. Blake's smirk vanished. Even Edward finally looked up, his knife still in midair. The chandelier buzzed faintly above us, the only sound in the suffocating silence that followed. The moment Ryan's words landed, the atmosphere in the dining room shifted like a storm breaking through still air. Blake leaned forward, his grin gone, eyes narrowing. What kind of stunt is this? His voice cracked at the edges, the confidence he usually wore slipping into something uglier. Ryan stayed calm. He didn't even sit down. He simply stood behind me, hand steady on my shoulder, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. No stunt, just the truth your family hoped you'd never see. Patricia's glass clinked against the table as she set it down too hard. Where did you even get that? She demanded, her face flushing red. Ryan met her stare evenly. Directly from the attorney's office this morning. The actual copy signed and notarized, the one that wasn't tampered with. The word tampered struck like lightning. Edward shifted uncomfortably, the knife and fork still in his hands, but his appetite suddenly gone. Patricia, he muttered, low, but the damage was already done. Blake shoved his chair back, wood scraping hard against the polished floor. You're bluffing. You think you can walk in here with a random envelope and… Ryan's hand didn't leave my shoulder, but his other hand pushed the envelope forward. Then open it, he said flatly. If you're so sure I'm bluffing… I sat there frozen, but not in fear. Frozen because for once I wasn't alone in this war. I watched Blake's fingers twitch as he reached for the envelope, then pulled back like it might burn him. Patricia's jaw tightened. This is unnecessary. We've already discussed what's best. Haley doesn't need to see that. Don't tell me what I need to see, I snapped, my voice finally breaking free. Everyone's heads turned. The silence that followed wasn't polite. It was heavy, charged, like no one recognized me in that moment. You've spoken over me my entire life, and I've stayed quiet. Not tonight, Patricia blinked, taken aback. Blake scoffed, masking his nerves with cruelty. What's the point, Haley? Even if it says you're in it, do you honestly think you could handle it? You'd waste everything, just like you've wasted your life. The words hit hard, but they didn't sink like they used to. Instead, they fueled me. You've called me weak, unworthy, irresponsible. But if I were truly those things, you wouldn't be this afraid of me seeing the truth, would you? Morgan shifted uncomfortably beside him, her fake smile cracking. Blake, maybe just open it? She whispered, as if even she knew this game was slipping out of his control. Ryan slid the envelope closer. Read it, Blake, out loud. For everyone at this table. His hands trembled as he ripped it open, the sound of paper tearing echoing louder than it should have. His eyes darted back and forth across the page, the color draining from his face. What does it say? I pressed, my voice steady now. He didn't answer. Ryan stepped forward, plucking the document from Blake's frozen grip. His voice carried like steel across the table as he read, To my daughter, Haley Mitchell, I leave the family estate, the accounts, and all remaining assets. Patricia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Edward's shoulders slumped like the truth had knocked the wind out of him. Morgan's eyes went wide, her fingers sliding nervously off Blake's arm. And Blake? He exploded. This is a lie! He roared, his chair toppling backward. His voice shook with fury, but beneath it I heard something sweeter. Panic. You set this up, both of you! Ryan's tone never rose. The will was filed months ago, Blake, long before tonight. Your mother tried to bury it, but paper trails don't lie. Patricia's eyes flashed with desperation. You don't understand. Blake was supposed to carry this family forward. Haley was never strong enough. Strong enough? I cut her off, my voice cracking but loud, sharp, alive. Do you hear yourself? You spent my entire life telling me I wasn't enough, just so you could hand everything to Blake. And still. Dad's signature. Mom's signature. The lawyer's seal. They all said otherwise. The only people who doubted me were you. Edward finally spoke, his voice gravelly, tired. Patricia. She's right. We went too far. For the first time, my mother faltered. The certainty in her eyes wavered, replaced with something brittle. Blake slammed his fist against the table, rattling the silverware. This isn't over, but it was. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone at that table knew it. Ryan folded the will neatly, tucking it back into the envelope before placing it in my hands. His eyes met mine, warm, unshaken. It's yours, Haley. Always was. I held it tight, the weight of years of silence, humiliation, and dismissal collapsing into something new. Not fear, not doubt, but fire. And for the first time in my life, I didn't stay quiet. I looked directly at my brother, then at my mother, and said, You built your lives on convincing me I had no worth. Tonight, you get to live with the truth. You were wrong. The silence that followed wasn't suffocating anymore. It was power, mine. Blake's chair lay toppled on the floor, but he didn't bother picking it up. He stood there, fists clenched, his face red with fury, veins bulging in his neck. This is a setup. You two think you can just waltz in here and ruin everything? I stayed seated, my hands wrapped tightly around the envelope Ryan had placed in them. For once I wasn't shaking. My brother's rage felt smaller than it ever had. You ruined it yourself, Blake, I said, my tone calm but cutting. By assuming everything was yours before it even was. Morgan shifted uncomfortably in her seat, glancing between us. The false confidence she had earlier was gone. She tugged lightly on Blake's sleeve, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe we should sit down and— Shut up, Morgan, he barked, yanking his arm away. His words cracked across the table like a whip, and for a moment, even she looked startled by the venom in his voice. Ryan didn't move from behind me, but the weight of his stare fell hard on Blake. Watch yourself, he warned, his voice low but firm. The more you unravel, the clearer it is who shouldn't be trusted with anything. Patricia slammed her hand on the table, her wine glass toppling and spilling red across the white tablecloth. Enough! We are not doing this here. Haley, you don't understand what you're stepping into. The responsibility, the stress, you'll drown under it. That's why we made the choice for you." Her words landed with the same cold superiority I'd heard my entire life, but they didn't cut the same way anymore. "No, Mom," I said, forcing her to meet my eyes. "You didn't make a choice for me. You made a choice for yourself, for Blake. You never even gave me the chance to prove I could be more than the picture you painted of me." Her lips pressed tight, but her eyes flickered. Uncertain, Edward shifted in his seat, sighing heavily. His fork clattered onto his plate. "Patricia, maybe it's time we admit it. We went too far. This family has been built on favoritism and denial. We should have trusted her. That was the first time I'd ever heard my father defend me." For years he sat back, silent, letting my mother dictate the narrative of who I was. And now, in the face of the truth, even he couldn't stomach the lies anymore. Blake sneered. "Oh, so now everyone's on her side. What about me? I'm the one who's done the work. I've built the connections. I've carried this family's name with respect. And now I'm supposed to believe all of that is worth less than her. What? Her pity party?" The laugh that left me wasn't forced. It was real. Dark, sharp, cutting. Respect? Blake, the only thing you've ever carried is your ego. You don't respect this family. You use it. And tonight, it finally caught up with you. Morgan sank lower in her chair, avoiding his gaze. Ryan stepped forward then, his voice steady as stone. "You know what the difference is, Blake? Haley doesn't need the money or the estate to prove who she is. She's already stronger than every single insult you've ever thrown at her. That's why the will names her. Not you." Patricia's face tightened, her fingers clutching the table edge. "This isn't how it was supposed to be," she whispered almost to herself. "Maybe," I said, my voice gentler now, but no less firm. "But it's how it is. You spent so long trying to control me, silence me, make me smaller. Tonight, you failed." The silence after that wasn't the suffocating kind. It was heavy but freeing. Like the first breath after being underwater too long. Blake, desperate, grabbed the envelope from my hands, ripping the pages out as if tearing them could rewrite the truth. But Ryan was quicker. His hand shot out, gripping Blake's wrist with a force that made him wince. "Careful," Ryan said, his eyes hard. "Destroying evidence won't change reality. It'll just show everyone how desperate you are." Blake yanked his hand back, fury burning in his eyes, but the fight in him was crumbling. He looked at Morgan for support, but she wouldn't meet his gaze. He looked at Patricia, but even she sat pale and shaken, her power slipping through her fingers. Edward finally stood, his chair creaking behind him. "This is done," he said firmly. "The will is clear. Haley, it's yours. That's the end of it." For the first time, my father's words didn't sound hollow. They sounded final. Blake's shoulders sagged, but his eyes glimmered with bitterness. "This isn't over," he muttered, his voice low, venomous. "Maybe not for you," I replied, steady. "But for me, it finally is." Ryan placed the envelope back in my hands, his touch warm, grounding. I felt the weight of it, not as a burden, but as proof. Proof that my silence had never meant weakness. Proof that every cruel word, every dismissal, every laugh at my expense had been built on lies. And as I looked around the table, the spilled wine, the pale faces, the silence choking the people who once controlled me, I realized something that made my chest burn with a strange, powerful relief. The house, the accounts, the legacy, it wasn't just inheritance. It was justice, and justice finally was mine. The dining room looked nothing like it had an hour ago. The plates of untouched food sat cold. The wine pooled like blood across the white tablecloth. And the air carried a sharp tension that clung to every breath. Blake paced, his footsteps loud against the hardwood floor. "You think this is some kind of victory, Haley? You think one piece of paper makes you stronger than me? I built my reputation on this family name. Without me, it's worthless." I stayed seated, the will still in my hands, Ryan standing like a shield at my back. My voice came out calm, measured. "That's the difference between us, Blake. You built your life on reputation. I built mine on resilience. Reputation fades. Resilience doesn't. Patricia pressed her hand against her forehead, as though the world had tilted beneath her. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she muttered again, her voice weak, stripped of the iron edge she usually carried. Edward finally spoke, his voice steady in a way I hadn't heard before. "Patricia, stop! We made this mess by choosing favorites. It ends tonight." Patricia's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "You're siding with her now? After everything?" "For once," Edward said, his tone heavy with regret. "I'm siding with the truth." The silence that followed was almost painful. Blake's fists clenched at his sides. He glanced at his fiancée, desperate for support. But Morgan sat quietly, her eyes on the floor. The smugness she'd flaunted earlier had dissolved into unease. "Don't look at me," Morgan said finally, her voice tight. "You told me this was already settled. You promised me everything was under control. Clearly, it's not." Her words hit Blake harder than anything I could have said. His face twisted in rage, but there was nowhere left for him to aim it. "You're all pathetic," he spat, his voice trembling now. "You think she deserves this?" "She's weak, I cut him off, my voice sharp enough to pierce his tirade. "No, Blake, I was quiet. That's not the same as weak. And tonight, you learned that the hard way." Ryan leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "You should leave while you still have some dignity left." Blake stared at him, then at me, his eyes burning with hatred. For a moment, I thought he might lash out physically. But then he saw the will still clutched in my hands, unshaken, undeniable. He let out a bitter laugh, shoved his chair upright, and stormed out of the room. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house like the final punctuation to years of manipulation. Patricia sagged back in her chair, her shoulders slumped. "You don't know what you're doing, Haley," she said, but her words carried no power anymore. They sounded hollow, empty. "Yes," I answered simply. "I do. For the first time in my life, I actually do." Edward exhaled heavily, rubbing his temples. "We owe you an apology," he said slowly. His voice cracked as though it had aged years in one night. "We should have treated you as our daughter, not a shadow to your brother." I stared at him, torn between bitterness and a strange ache of relief. "You had years to defend me. You chose silence. Tonight doesn't erase that." His face fell, but I didn't soften my words. The truth had been buried for too long to sugarcoat it now. Ryan placed a hand gently on my shoulder, steady and reassuring. "You don't owe them anything anymore," he murmured. "This is yours, Haley. You decide what happens next." The weight of his words settled deep in my chest. For so long, I had lived under their control, their definitions of who I was supposed to be. Now I held the proof that I was never powerless. I stood slowly, folding the will carefully and tucking it back into the envelope. I looked around the room one last time. The overturned glass, the spilled wine, the pale faces of the people who had underestimated me. "I'm not here to beg for your approval anymore," I said, my voice steady. "You don't get to tell me who I am. You don't get to decide what I deserve. That's over." Patricia opened her mouth, but no words came. Edward lowered his eyes, shame painted across his face. And me? I walked away. Ryan followed close behind, his presence a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone anymore. When we stepped out of that suffocating house, the night air hit my skin like freedom itself. For the first time, the world felt wide open, not like a cage. I looked down at the envelope in my hands, at the name written clearly inside, the name that proved I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was the heir. I was the one who had survived their cruelty, their favoritism, their silence. And as Ryan's hand found mine, warm and steady, I realized something more powerful than any inheritance. The will didn't just give me the estate, it gave me back my voice, and I would never, ever lose it again.